Hello, my name is Grace Winura and this is Horse Pro, the channel dedicated to empowering amateur horse enthusiasts and supporting the budding professional. If you have not yet hit subscribe, please do to become a member of our community. And if you find any of today's content of value, please hit the like icon. Now today we have quite a maudlin subject, and it's close to home because someone I know just lost a horse yesterday to a death. And it reminded me of many situations that we may experience the loss of our equine partner. So today I am going to go over several ways that we experience loss. And really I didn't want to do this video. This one really upsets me as a horse owner, as a horse enthusiast, as a horse lover, an animal lover, as a human being. But I think that it's something that we don't always talk about. So I am going to proceed with this video. So we have a benign version of loss. So this could include, for instance, when a child starts to learn to ride, they may part board or lease a pony, and that is for a duration of time. And they know that there's going to come an ending to that time. And so we view it as borrowed, and somehow, even though the loss, we might experience very emotional welling of grief in terms of tears, we've been prepared for it the whole time from the beginning, that we may have to give this horse or pony up. And so even though at the moment it becomes quite tragic in our minds, we have already prepared ourselves, so our subconscious allows us to move on. So I would consider that to be a benign sense of loss in the long run. Another version of this is when a child gets a pony and physically outgrows it. So all along, kids know they're growing. They know that things are changing in their bodies. So there comes a time at which they have to say what is better for the pony and what is better for me, i.e., am I too big for this pony? Is it unfair for it to carry my weight? And so kids and parents are accepting of this when they buy ponies, because often children will outgrow them. It's very few people that can stay on ponies their whole life, although there are a few. So those are benign senses of loss. Those are situations where we prepare ourselves early. It's not sudden, it's not catastrophic. We are organized in terms of how we are going to cope, even though at the time it may come as a sudden shock, the last moment where we have to hand the lead rope over. We are actually prepared for this. Now, a situation where perhaps we are less prepared is when we feel that we've gone beyond what the horse can offer us. We're a hunter jumper, we've bought a horse for 2'3" or 2'6". Now we want to jump 3 foot and the horse cannot. Or perhaps we don't want to jump at all and we'd like to go into dressage, or we'd like to go into Western or saddle seat. And so now our equine partner, if we were to continue with them, we have to decide whether or not that horse can learn a new job, whether it's suitable for it, can it jump that high. So again, we have to really think logically at this point, not emotionally, and divorce ourselves from what we want, which is to stay with our equine partner, and what is best for the equine partner. But again, this is a benign situation of loss. We're trying to stack the deck in terms of what's good for us and what's good for the horse. So sometimes we do have to sell and move on. Sometimes we sell because we're going to university or continuing with our lives, having children, having families, moving state or moving province. So again, that's a benign sense of loss. While we might feel it very heavily at the time, we understand the circumstance and the need. Now, on this front, selling or giving or donating a horse, there is a very negative aspect. What if we're in a situation where suddenly we cannot afford the upkeep, the care, the veterinary bills, the feed, the farrier, the basic necessities of life for a horse? What happens? We've all heard of them. We've all seen on YouTube and on Facebook, on the news, situations where people have lost control of their finances and they have such an emotional bond to the horses, they can't seem to give them up. Now at this point, that's when community needs to step in. That's when community needs to say, hey, these horses are suffering. This person is suffering. They can't deal with the loss, the emotional loss of the horse, so they're not making a bright decision that's based on what is good for the horse and actually what's good for them. So that is a little bit of a dark side to selling a horse. This is when it becomes a necessity because we now no longer have finances, so we have to donate them. But again, this situation is not based on the horses hopefully not getting to a point where euthanasia is involved or any kind of catastrophic death. But it does come a period in time where we've had an equine horse, we've kept it its entire life, we love it. I've had situations where we've had horses for 10, 15, 20 years. They've been valuable partners to their owners. The owners have never sold them. They mean so much to them, and they were able to achieve whatever they wanted to achieve with the horse. But there comes a day where age may necessitate euthanasia. That is really a tough decision. It's really tough because emotionally we have to prepare ourselves to part with that animal being in our lives. We think of all the things it's given us, the good times, the pleasures, what it's taught us. And we really, at that point, we don't want to do it. And sometimes we wait too long. The horse starts to lose weight. It starts to suffer. Maybe it's in a situation where it's had to be rushed to an equine veterinary hospital, and it may be suffering a surgery, and we have to make a decision. Do we continue with the surgery? And we have to evaluate the costs of this, the aftercare, and the quality of life the horse might have, or do we consider euthanasia at that time? Now, each person is faced when you have an animal, whether it's a horse or a dog, with this kind of a cat, with this kind of decision at some point. And there is no right or wrong answer. You have to really try to think about what you can deal with in this situation. Can you afford the aftercare? If the horse never comes around after a surgical procedure, can you make a decision after the fact? So sometimes that is almost so stressful that we become inactive. And that's when talking to other people, talking to professionals, talking to our friends may help us to see some clarity. But what happens when a horse naturally goes to sleep and doesn't wake up? Well, it's very much we experience loss in our life like we would to any other loss in our life, whether it be human, animal, job, partnership, marriage. We end up dealing with things in our own way. And sometimes this means we have to talk to professionals. Sometimes we talk to other people. Sometimes we're grateful we didn't have to make a decision to euthanize the horse, and we feel relief. So this is all part of natural evolution of losing a horse. Now, what happens when we experience the loss of a horse through catastrophe, through tragic circumstance? And we've all been in these scenarios. We hear of somebody's horse running around an arena and breaking its leg and needing to be euthanized. We hear about horses who are rushed for surgery, colic or otherwise, and they have to be euthanized. These are tragic and catastrophic. They're sudden. And at that point, we have not prepared ourselves. This is not benign. This is really a sudden stress situation we find ourselves in, and we need to look towards friends and family in order to help us at this point. Now, I can tell you that I've experienced all these types of losses. I've experienced a loss when I was younger, having to move on from my first horse. And I must have cried for weeks thinking about it. And I felt like a traitor when I sold the horse on to a wonderful home. And then I was so happy to get the new horse, who seemed to have more talent, to take me a little bit further in my evolutionary journey as a rider. But I had to come to grips with that, and it did take me a while. I've experienced the loss of a horse through catastrophic death more than once. And this is something that I don't know that you ever get over. I think you come to terms with it, and we put it in the back of our minds, and we do learn to have coping mechanisms, but I think it always the emotions can well up, especially when other people experience loss. Now, sometimes we need to deal with these emotions. We need to let them into our lives to understand the meaning that that horse had to us. But then we do need to move on. As a horse seller, I've had situations where I think or I felt that I was more in grief over selling a horse, especially one that had worked for us for many years, than possibly the owners. I remember a situation with one of my very favorite horses early in my career called Chucky. And when we needed to sell the horse because the owner had decided to go another way from jumper into the hunter world, we needed to sell the horse. I didn't have someone else for this horse, yet I'd had him in my stable through several owners. So I felt very, very, very attached to this horse, and he was very special to me. I remember I sold him to a good friend, a great home, a wonderful trainer, a great kid, but I had to deliver him at a show. And I tell you, I wore sunglasses. I felt like the death knell was rolling as I handed over the lead rope. And it was a really hard situation. So sometimes it's not even a direct loss of something that we've had in terms of ownership or in terms of a feeling of riding the horse or actually being part of its life other than maybe as a caregiver. So we can experience loss for horses in many, many ways. So again, we have the more benign, which is having to let go, because logically this horse can either not perform its duty for us anymore, or it would not be right for us to ask of it. Perhaps we've outgrown it. Perhaps our lives have changed, our economic status, our personal status, and it necessitates finding the horse a new home. And then there is tragic loss, which we're never prepared for. So I feel that we need to sometimes understand that when we are so happy to get a horse and we're so happy to have it in our lives, we shouldn't dwell about the possible loss. But I think it does necessitate a conversation like this so that everyone understands we are all human. We all may experience this. We all are affected by the loss, the sale, the tragic death, the eventual death, the benign necessitation for selling a horse or moving on from a horse or pony. So please don't feel alone. If you've ever felt any of these losses, I would love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear your situation in the comment box below. And please, if you know anybody recently who's lost a horse, such as I do, then send them well wishes. Tell them that they're not alone. And really, go hug your horse today.